The last location Alex visited on the list, number 14, was described as Desert Town. This was precisely what it was, a town in the middle of a desert. Alex passed over the town twice before landing, uncertain of the accuracy of the coordinates ascertained by the craft's computer. Alex had seen photographs and reference documents of deserts, the rocks and stones and sand, the cactus and assorted arid weeds, yet he didn't expect what he came into. This was not a naturally occurring desert, but a man-made one. The sand swept over the desert surface like dust, thin as smoke, as if the granules had been pulverized into microscopic particles. He had to focus through the craft's windows to see hints of geometric patterns under the frail sand, imprints of foundations where walls and floors had been, any semblance of a town that had survived decades after the cataclysm. When Alex Gale visually confirmed to be where he thought himself to be, he went through the landing protocols and settled away from what he assumed to be the center of the blast area. Throughout the ruins, there were knee-high tree stumps, all cut off rather than burnt off, at a consistent height, as if that same red-hot blade swung across and chopped them all down. Where had the remains of those trees gone, if they hadn't been burned down? All of the structures in the town suffered this exact damage, as with all the ruins he visited, the extent of the damage more evident at ground level than from the air. The stronger structures withstood the cataclysm the further they were from the center of the blast. Hollowed out as they were, there was still no evidence of great heat or fire. Where the trees were cut down, the cut was pulverized, but lacking significant burn damage. Alex went so far as to measure from the point of damage to the ground and noticed hardly any meaningful variation in the height of damage. Every single wall, steel beam, or foundation, from streetlights to trees, and even shrubs and saplings for that matter, they suffered this exact damage, a distance of 3 feet from ground level. This was as consistent and precise as the other ruins, and was specifically disturbing. Stone fractures and concrete crumbles. Steel and copper and aluminum have different melting points and different endurances to twisting and cutting. Even the few plastic conduits and plumbing pipes that endured the elements were cut down to this height of 3 feet. Structures made of brick, stone, and concrete, capable of withstanding what appeared to be the effects of a specialized weapon, still stood within a quarter-mile of ground zero. Windows were smashed out and open, dust and sand piling in through the openings. Masonry endured what the trees could not, but anything else that presumed to have burned was gone. Burned. The word kept appearing in Alex Gale's mind. From all his memory prior to his being put to sleep, the only weapons he knew of capable of such wide destruction were explosive in nature, incendiary, or nuclear, forces that caused burning and blisters, what turned organic material into ashes while steel buckled and concrete collapsed. He pushed through the heavy sand towards the remaining structures, pushing the mystery out of his mind. There were other priorities to focus on. There would be plenty of time while in flight to mull over the mystery of this magical weapon. As far as what Alex could exhume from the sand and dust, there was no treasure here. There was minimal residual radiation. In many areas he walked between his craft and the structures he went towards, the thin sand and dust was hardened and compact. As Alex crossed over this compacted sand surface, he examined what he walked upon, a surface more akin to baker's flour that had set too long in its packaging, hardened from the moisture it drew out from the ambient air. Where Alex forced his heel into the surface, the firm surface cracked, his heel sinking into a softer, yet heavier, underlying material. From what the craft's computer and he concluded, the blast had concentrated on an industrial area, south from the center of the city. At this city center was the remains of a bank, among several other smaller standing buildings. The city itself was along the rural western foothills of the mountain range he approached, the mountains showing as a blue and violet ridge of weather and stone overshadowing the city. The growing presence of a storm still lingered over the northern peaks, not yet fully formed. It was a very picturesque scene, considering the ruins. Alex made his way to the bank, where there would be a vault. The storm coming closer, he had to make time, or spend his time waiting out the storm before going into the mountains. The countdown clock on the console of his craft was a consistent reminder, as were the ruins, that time was fleeting. Soon he would be out of time. There was no indication the bank would have what he was looking for. He could easily forget the bank and just go into the mountains. But things of value were always locked away in banks. This was what Alex remembered from the past. The identity of the thing of value Alex looked for was more vague than understanding that banks held things of value. Was this valuable item gold? Was it a mechanism or machine, a tool of importance and sophistication? Of what value were any of these things in the world as it was? Still, it was valuable, and he knew he had to find it. Alex climbed through the sand that drifted over the front steps to the hollowed front doors. The bank was in a neoclassical style, with faux pillars on either side of the doors, with fine cast cement decorations around the base of the pillars. The bank survived the cataclysm, the pillars pockmarked and scarred from debris, decades of the surrounding sand blown against the walls. The window frames were corroded, bits of glass still stuck within the pitted steel sashes. Alex examined the bits of glass, picking them out of the charred crusts of rubber. The broken edges were rounded, but not from erosion. The glass had been suddenly heated, nearly to melting point, but the heat didn't last long enough to liquefy the glass. It was evidence of an extreme burst of immense energy that faded as quickly. So, there had been a heat flash. This, and the few papers he found not vaporized by time, were the only indications of such heat. Alex looked back over where he came, seeing his small craft in the distance. It had computers capable of analysis, so he pulled a few bits of glass out and put them in his pocket. He walked through the front doors. Alex was touched with the memory of the world. Of the many places he had visited, so few of them had standing buildings. The sensation of walls and a ceiling surrounding him brought the past closer to his mind. Every soul on earth, no matter their desperation or anguish or fatalism, stood firm against the idea they would be the ones vanquished by cataclysm. How could one think themselves a victim of the end of the world, save for the few moments on their deathbed? Always there was the rational figure of influence to steer the world away from the brink, a statesman with the world's best interests ahead of his own, a governor or senator eager to make sure the world was left behind for future generations. Ego and avarice, the greatest hubris of the members of the state. They think themselves the better type of human being and worthy of the positions they were granted. Ego and avarice, the motive force of the members of the state, who first seek power before having reason to possess it. Ego and avarice, thieves in the night of the soul, restricted only by the most animalistic impulses, and are otherwise free to use power for the benefit of like-minded creatures. Alex remembered the world that was once thriving and vibrant. No matter the tribes and conflicts, there was someone who thwarted the lighting of the fuse. Several times, on the verge of absolute ruin, there was always a saint or champion who turned the course of inevitability. But not now. These ruins proved this. This champion saw no reason to save the world. That champion, scoffed at and denounced by the masses so eagerly willing to put absolute faith in the lowest of their leaders, saw no opportunity to save the world without utter self-sacrifice. This was noble, this sacrifice, but to what end? What fool takes it upon themselves to be shredded by all at the moment they save the world, to be crushed and ground by the public as harbinger of doom, and then only revered after the fact, at the convenience of those who place themselves as the motive power of the visionary who saved them. There was no savior here. Wherever that champion was, they saw fit to let the world do what it insisted upon doing, and the champion went their own way, to fade into oblivion as all others did.